If you're already retired or you plan to retire in the next few years, listen closely, because this is one of the most important videos I've ever made for you. Under the tax law we're living under right now, retirees have roughly a 4-year window to make some very smart moves, or to do nothing and quietly pay for it later. If you waste these next 4 years, you could end up paying more tax on your retirement income, your investments, and even the money you leave to your kids than you ever needed to. And the painful part is you might not feel it right away. You might only feel it in your 70s when the bills get bigger and your options get smaller. In this video, I'm going to show you what this 4-year window actually is, why it matters specifically for retirees and near retirees, the most painful mistakes I see people make, and a simple step-by-step way to use these years wisely without becoming a tax expert. If I could help you legally reduce how much the government takes over the rest of your retirement just by using the next 4 years more wisely, would you stay with me for 25 minutes? By the end, you'll know exactly what conversations you need to have with yourself, with your spouse, and with a good tax professional this year, not someday. Hello everyone, I'm George Edward. If you're over 50 and you want someone in your corner who's not trying to sell you a product but to give you clear understanding, go ahead and hit that subscribe button now and tap the little bell. That way you won't miss the next videos about protecting your savings, planning your income, and avoiding traps aimed at retirees. There's a line I love that goes, "The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now." For many of us, this 4-year window in the tax law is our now. We can't go back and change what we did in our 30s or 40s, but we can decide what we're going to do in the next few years while we still have a chance to shape how much tax we pay for the rest of our lives. Let's start with what changed in plain English and why the next few years matter more than usual. Tax laws are not written in stone. Congress passes new laws, old parts expire, rates and brackets go up or down, deductions and credits appear and disappear. Every so often, a big tax law comes along that sets rules for a period of years, and then, built right into the law, it says, on this date, parts of this will change or go away. That's what I mean when I talk about a window. Right now, we're inside one of those windows. I'm not going to throw long law names at you, but here's the idea. The tax brackets we have today, how much income fits into each bracket, the standard deduction, and some of the rules around estates and gifts are scheduled to change in a few years if Congress doesn't act. Many professionals who live and breathe this stuff believe that for a lot of retirees, the next several years may actually be a relatively friendly time to do certain things, like taking some extra income or moving money from taxed later to taxed now at a known rate, compared to what could come after this window closes. Now, I'm not in the business of predicting the future. You'll never hear me say, I know exactly what tax rates will be in 2029. I don't. No one does. But we do know what's written in the current law. We know there is a scheduled change on the horizon, and I've been around long enough to see what happens when people ignore these windows. They wake up after the law has changed and say, if only I had known back then. If only I had moved some money when the rates were lower. If only I had done some planning when I had the chance. I remember a couple I knew back in the late 90s, there was a period where certain capital gains were taxed at lower rates for a while. Their advisor suggested they might want to realize some gains slowly over a few years. They said, we'll get to it. They never did. The law changed, the rates went up, and when they finally sold, they paid thousands more than they would have. I don't want you saying a version of that story 4 years from now. Ask yourself for a moment, what if tax rates go up just as you start needing more income from your accounts? What if, right now, you have a chance to move some money from taxed later to taxed now at a known rate, but you wait until the window closes? There's that old dark joke. In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. We can't avoid taxes, nor should we try in dishonest ways, but within the rules, we can choose when and how much we pay more carefully. That's what this is about. To understand why this window matters so much, you first have to see how taxes hit retirees differently from working folks. When you're working, it's pretty simple. You get a paycheck, taxes are taken out. Maybe you see a refund or a small bill in April. But in retirement, your income often comes from several different places, and the tax man touches each one a little differently. If you have a pension, that pension is usually fully taxable as ordinary income each year. If you have traditional IRAs or 401ks, most or all of the money you take out is also taxable income because you didn't pay tax on it when you put it in. Those accounts are what we call tax deferred. You postpone the tax until later. Well, later eventually shows up. Then you have Social Security, Many people are surprised to learn that Social Security benefits can be partially taxable depending on how much other income you have. If you have higher income from pensions, IRAs, or investments, a bigger chunk of your Social Security can be taxed each year. It's not all or nothing. It's on a sliding scale. But the more income you stack on top, the more of your Social Security gets pulled into the tax web. On top of that, you may have a regular investment account, a brokerage account in your name, where you hold stocks, funds, or bonds. That's a taxable account. You don't get a tax break when you put money in, but you also don't get whacked just for holding it. Instead, you pay tax on dividends, interest, and on capital gains when you sell something for more than you paid. So you've really got three basic buckets. Tax-deferred accounts like traditional IRAs and 401ks, you got a break on the way in, and you pay tax later when you take the money out. Taxable accounts like regular brokerage, you pay as you go on interest, dividends, and realized gains. And tax-free accounts like Roth IRAs, if done correctly, you pay tax once up front, then under current rules, those future qualified withdrawals are tax-free. Now here's where the risk of doing nothing shows up. Those tax-deferred accounts, the IRAs and 401ks, come with a string attached, required minimum distributions, or RMDs. At a certain age, the government says, you've deferred long enough. You must pull out a minimum amount each year, and you must pay the tax. It doesn't matter if you need the income or not. If those accounts are big, those required withdrawals can push you into higher tax brackets, increase the portion of Social Security that's taxable, and even affect what you pay for Medicare premiums. If tax rates are higher in the future because the law changes, or just because your income is higher, kicking the can down the road can be far more expensive than you expect. I've watched it happen. I've seen retirees in their 70s say, I didn't realize my RMDs would be this big. I wish I'd done something about this 10 years ago when my income was lower and I had more flexibility. On the other hand, I've also seen people who used windows like the one we're in now to quietly, calmly reposition their money so they had more control later. One man I knew in his early 60s worked with a tax-savvy planner. Over several years, they moved small pieces of his tax-deferred accounts into Roth, paid tax at rates they were comfortable with, and trimmed some big gains in his taxable account on a schedule. When he hit RMD age, his required distributions were smaller, his tax brackets were more manageable, and he had a nice chunk in Roth that didn't create new tax problems when he tapped it. Ask yourself, do you know how much of your retirement money the government is quietly planning to take over the rest of your life? Are you building a future where you control your income and taxes as much as you can, or where the default rules just march you along? There's a line from the investing world that goes, the miracle of compounding returns has been overwhelmed by the tyranny of compounding costs. For retirees, taxes can be one of those compounding costs if you never step back and plan. So what exactly can this 4-year window do for you? Again, I'm not giving you personal tax advice here. I'm sharing concepts so you can have smarter conversations with a qualified tax professional or financial planner who understands your situation. One big opportunity some retirees look at is spreading out taxable withdrawals or Roth conversions over several years, while the current rates are known and, for many, relatively moderate. Instead of waiting until RMD age and getting slammed with big required withdrawals that shove you into higher brackets, some folks choose to take moderate, voluntary withdrawals now. Others convert a slice of their traditional IRA or 401k into a Roth each year. That means they pay the tax now by choice at a rate they can see in exchange for potential tax-free withdrawals later under current rules. This is not something to do on a hunch or based on a YouTube video. You absolutely want a qualified tax professional involved. But the idea is simple. Do you want to pay some tax now at a known rate on your own schedule, or roll the dice and maybe pay more later at worse rates when you have no choice? Another opportunity, depending on your situation, is realizing capital gains strategically. If you have stocks or funds that have grown a lot in a taxable account, you may be sitting on big unrealized gains. In some periods, tax rates on those gains are lower than they've been in the past. Rather than letting that pile grow and then having to sell a huge chunk in one bad year, some people use windows like this to trim positions, take some gains, and reposition their portfolio. Again, not all at once, but in a paced, planned way. A third idea is shifting from being all in tax deferred to having a healthier mix across tax buckets. I talk to many people in their 60s who have most of their money in traditional IRAs and 401ks and almost nothing in Roth or taxable accounts. That means almost every dollar they spend later will show up as taxable income. Over a 4-year window, some retirees work to move gradually toward a balance, some tax-deferred, some taxable, some tax-free. That way, when they're 75 or 80, they can choose which bucket to pull from in a given year to avoid jumping into a higher bracket. For some families, there's also a legacy angle. Right now, the rules around how much you can leave without estate tax and how your heirs must take money out of inherited IRAs are known. In 4 or 5 years, that could look very different. So, some people use windows like this to start giving in small regular amounts or to structure their accounts so their children get less in tax-deferred form and more in tax-free or post-tax form. That can be as simple as modest annual gifts or as complex as trusts, but it all starts with awareness. Let me give you a picture. Imagine Mary, 66 years old, just retired. She has $500,000 in a traditional IRA, $50,000 in a Roth, and $100,000 in a taxable account. If Mary does nothing for the next 4 years, she'll collect Social Security, maybe a bit from her IRA, and then one day she hits RMD age and the government says, time to take out more whether you want to or not. Her tax bill goes up, more of her Social Security gets taxed, and her flexibility shrinks just as healthcare costs may be rising. Now imagine the same Mary, but this time she and her tax professional use the 4-year window. Each year, they convert a manageable slice of her traditional IRA into Roth, keeping her within a tax bracket they're comfortable with. They also take a little extra from the IRA beyond what they need and use it to live on, letting her Roth and taxable accounts grow more quietly. They look at her taxable account and, in good years, sell some winners so she isn't stuck with one huge gain later. She doesn't beat the system. She simply uses the rules as they exist today. If for Mary, tax rates in these years are the lowest she'll ever see again, wouldn't it make sense to do some of the tax paying on her terms now and buy herself more freedom later? What would it feel like at 75 to know you've already done a lot of the tax planning work instead of dreading every April and every RMD notice? There's an old line I keep in mind. You only find out who is swimming naked when the tide goes out. When tax laws change, when this window closes and perhaps higher rates or tougher rules appear, it becomes very obvious who used the window and who didn't. Some retirees will say, I'm glad I took action. Others will say, I wish someone had shaken me awake. So how do you actually use these years without getting overwhelmed? Let me give you a simple 4-year action map. This is not a personal plan for you, but a way to think about the stages. Then you take this framework to a qualified tax professional or fee-only fiduciary planner and fill in the details. Think of year 1 as the get clear and organize year. In this year, your main job isn't to do a bunch of fancy moves. It's to see your situation clearly, probably for the first time on one page. You list every account, traditional IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, any Roth accounts, regular brokerage accounts, savings, CDs. Next to each, you note roughly how much is in it and whether it's taxed now, taxable, later, tax deferred, or, under current rules, not again, Roth. You mark your expected Social Security, any pension, and other income. Then in year 1, you sit down with a qualified tax professional or a fiduciary financial planner, someone who is paid for advice, not for selling you a product, and you say, I want to understand how the current tax law in the next few years affect my retirement income and what my options are. Year 1 is about clarity. You can't plan what you don't see. Year 2 is where many people start controlled, modest moves. If their professional team agrees, it makes sense. Maybe that means starting small Roth conversions, nothing wild, just moving a piece of your IRA into Roth while staying inside a target tax bracket. Maybe it means taking some extra planned withdrawals from your tax-deferred accounts to fill up lower tax brackets now, instead of waiting. Maybe it means trimming a big, concentrated stock position in your taxable account, realizing some gains under the current rules. When I sold a rental property years ago, I learned this lesson the hard way. I could have sold it all in 1 year, taken one big tax hit, and been done. Instead, after talking with a professional, I spread the sale over 2 years. That reduced the bite and gave me more breathing room. I remember thinking, why didn't I learn to spread things out sooner? Year 2 of your map is about starting to spread things out under guidance instead of letting everything pile up into one painful future. Year 3 is your adjust and optimize year. By now, you and your tax person can see how the last year or two of moves affected your tax return. Did your income jump more than you liked? Did you stay within the brackets you aimed for? Did it change how much of your Social Security was taxed? Based on that real-world experience, you might increase or decrease the amount you convert to Roth each year, or the extra withdrawals you take. If you give to charity, you might look at ways to do that in a more tax-efficient way, like giving from certain accounts instead of from your checking, if that's appropriate for you. Year 4 is your final window check. This is the last year under current law before the scheduled changes. That doesn't mean panic. It means you sit down with your tax professional and ask very specific questions. Given my situation, is there anything else that makes sense to do this year under these rules? Is there any last repositioning that would be smart before the law changes? You're not trying to cram everything into year 4. You've already been doing measured things for the past 3 years. This is more like checking your pockets before you leave the house. Ask yourself, 4 years from now, do you want to look back and say, I made a plan and followed it, or I always meant to, but I never got around to it? Be honest, which year are you in right now? Some of you are in what I call year 0, no clarity at all. Everything scattered in statements, no big picture. That's okay. Year 0 can turn into year 1 as soon as you pull out a notepad and start writing things down. There's a simple piece of wisdom I try to live by. Know what you own and know why you own it. I'd add, for our purposes, know how it's taxed and know why you're choosing to move it or not move it over these next years. Blind faith is not a plan. To make this even more real, let's compare 2 simple scenarios. We'll keep the math light because the point is direction, not precision. Think about John, 65 years old, just retired. John has $600,000 in a traditional IRA. He has almost nothing in Roth and just a small emergency fund in savings. His wife has Social Security and he'll start his soon. Scenario A. John does nothing special for the next 4 years. He takes the minimum he needs from his IRA to live, maybe a bit more, but he doesn't think about taxes much. He figures he'll deal with it when he has to. Then he hits the age where RMDs kick in. The government looks at his $600,000 IRA, which might be more by then, and says, John, you must take out X% this year. That withdrawal, added to his and his wife's Social Security and any other income, pushes him into a higher tax bracket. A bigger chunk of their Social Security becomes taxable. Their Medicare premiums may inch up because their income is higher. And when John passes away, his kids inherit a big traditional IRA that they must withdraw over a limited number of years, paying tax at their own, possibly high rates. Scenario B. John hears a grumpy old guy on YouTube talk about a 4-year window and decides to act. Over the next 4 years, he works with a tax professional. Together, they decide that each year, John will convert a portion of his traditional IRA into a Roth, maybe $25,000 or $30,000 a year, carefully staying in a tax bracket they are comfortable with. He pays some tax now on purpose at rates he and his advisor expect are reasonable. He may also take a bit more from his IRA early on when his income is otherwise lower, using that to live on instead of waiting. As the years go by, John's traditional IRA gets smaller than it would have been. His Roth grows. When he hits RMD age, his required distributions are based on a smaller balance, so the forced withdrawals are smaller. That means his tax bracket in those years can be lower than in scenario A. Less of his Social Security gets pulled into the taxable column. When John dies, his kids still pay tax on whatever is left in the traditional IRA, but a bigger portion of what they inherit is in Roth or in post-tax form, which under current rules is a lot kinder to them. We don't need exact tax tables to see the difference. In scenario A, John lets the default rules decide when and how he pays. In scenario B, John uses the 4-year window to voluntarily pay some tax now at known rates to avoid larger forced tax bills later at unknown rates. Who do you want to control the timing and size of your tax bills? You with a plan or the default settings? If your future self at 75 could sit across from you right now, what would they beg you to do with this 4-year window? There's a line I like. The big money is not in the buying and the selling, but in the waiting. With taxes, the big savings often come not from some clever trick, but from patiently planning over years, waiting for the right moments, spreading things out, not rushing, but also not ignoring the window in front of you. Now, I know some of you are feeling a knot in your stomach right now. George, I'm scared of making a tax mistake. I don't understand all this language. And what if the laws change again? Let's tackle those fears. First, being afraid of making a tax mistake is healthy. It means you respect how serious this is. But the answer is not to freeze. The answer is to work with a qualified tax professional, a CPA or enrolled agent or a fiduciary financial planner who understands taxes, not a salesperson whose main goal is to push a product. You don't have to become a tax expert yourself. You just need to know enough to ask good questions and to recognize when something sounds too slick. Second, you do not have to understand every line of the tax code. I've been dealing with this stuff for decades, and I still ask my tax preparer, explain this to me like I'm 10. Your job is to grasp the big ideas. Which of your accounts are taxed now, which are taxed later, how much flexibility you have and when you take income, and what the next few years look like under current law. You can let professionals handle the forms and code numbers. Third, yes, the laws will change again. That's almost guaranteed, but that's exactly why you use the windows we know about instead of trying to predict the unpredictable. We know there is a scheduled change a few years out. We don't know exactly what will replace it, so you do your best planning under the rules on the books now, and you stay flexible enough to adjust if new laws come along. I also want to give you a warning. Whenever there is fear around taxes, there are people ready to sell complicated solutions. Be very cautious of anyone who uses tax fear to sell you a complex annuity, a high-fee insurance product, or some secret loophole scheme. If every road in their conversation seems to lead to one expensive product with a big commission attached to it, step back. The right solution for you is unlikely to be the same high commission contract they recommend to everyone who walks through the door. Good help looks different. A good helper will sit down with your whole picture. They'll ask about your income needs, your health, your family, your goals. They'll look at all your accounts, not just the one they can earn a fee on. When you meet with a tax professional or planner, bring questions like, how does the current tax law in the next few years affect my retirement income? Should I even be thinking about Roth conversions or planned withdrawals, or does that not fit my situation? If I do this, how might it affect how much of my Social Security is taxed? And then listen not just to their words, but to their style. Do they explain things in plain language? Do they rush you? Have you ever felt pushed into a financial product with tax benefits that you didn't really understand? I have. Years ago, before I knew better, I sat in a seminar where someone promised tax-free income for life if we just bought a certain complicated product. The charts looked wonderful, the language was smooth, and my head was spinning. Looking back, the best thing I did that day was walk out without signing a thing. Later, when I had a more sober look, I realized how stacked the fees were in their favor, not mine. There's a bit of wisdom that says, the greatest enemy of a good plan is the dream of a perfect plan. You do not need a perfect tax plan. You don't need to outsmart Congress. You just need a good plan that uses this 4-year window in a sensible way. Often your best move is actually simpler than what fear-based marketing people are trying to sell you. So, let's bring this home. What can you do this week, just this week, to move from worry to action? First, get your picture on one page. Take a blank sheet of paper and write down every account where you have retirement or investment money. Next to each one, write roughly how much is in there. Then add 3 little letters, now, later, or Roth. Now for taxable accounts and bank accounts where you pay as you go. Later for tax-deferred accounts like traditional IRAs and 401ks. Roth for accounts that, under current rules, won't be taxed again if you follow the rules. This alone will give you more clarity than many people ever have. Second, schedule a conversation. Call or email a trusted tax professional or a fee-only fiduciary financial planner. You can say something as simple as, I'm retired or close to it. I've heard that the current tax law may change in a few years, and I want to understand how the next 4 years affect my retirement income and withdrawals. Put that appointment on your calendar this week, even if the meeting itself is a few weeks out. Having it scheduled will change how you see your situation. Third, decide on one move to explore, not 10. 1. Maybe it's ask my tax person if a small Roth conversion makes sense this year. Maybe it's plan to take a little extra from my IRA to fill a low tax bracket and invest it in a taxable account. Maybe it's revisit how my Social Security, pension, and IRA withdrawals fit together. Or maybe it's simply Commit to an annual tax review for the next 4 years instead of just dropping off paperwork every April. Remember, doing nothing is a decision too, and often the most expensive one. As George Edward, I'm warning you as clearly as I can. Retirees can't afford to sleep through the next 4 years of this tax law. You have worked too hard for too many decades to let the government take more than it has to simply because no one ever told you there was a window and no one nudged you to look through it. There's a line I think about often. Risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. These next 4 years are your chance to move from not knowing to knowing and acting. Your future self, 10, 15 years from now, will not care whether you got every move perfect. They will care deeply that you took this seriously and did something while you still had time. If this helped you, please hit the like button so more retirees see it. In the comments, tell me, are you in year 0, year 1, 2, 3, or 4 of your planning? Have you ever used a tax window before or missed one? I read those and they guide what I cover next. Share this video with a friend or sibling who's retired and hasn't thought about taxes beyond April 15th. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel and tap that bell so you and I can keep walking through these years together. I'm George Edward. Don't waste this window. I'll see you in the next one.